There comes a moment in every human life where waiting is no longer an option. A moment where excuses become heavier than effort, where comfort begins to feel like a cage instead of a reward. And in that moment, the difference between those who rise and those who remain stuck is not talent, not luck, not connections. It is force. The ability to force yourself to move when your feelings are telling you to stay still. You must understand something very clearly. Success does not respond to convenience. It responds to command. It responds to pressure. It responds to a human being who decides, I will move, whether I feel like it or not. Because feelings are unreliable. They change with the weather, with opinions, with circumstances. But a decision, when it is rooted deep enough, creates a different kind of energy. It creates momentum. Most people are waiting for the perfect moment. They are waiting to feel ready. They are waiting for motivation to show up like a guest knocking on their door. But motivation is not a visitor. It is a servant. It shows up only when you give it orders. And the only way to give it orders is through action. You don't wait to feel motivated before you act and then motivation follows. Forcing yourself is not about being harsh or cruel to yourself. It is about understanding your potential and refusing to negotiate with your limitations. It is about recognizing that inside you is more strength than your habits have allowed you to experience. Every time you say, I don't feel like it, there is another voice inside you saying, but you can. And the voice you choose to obey will determine your future. You see, the doors of opportunity are not magical. They do not open because you wish hard enough. They open because you become the kind of person who is ready to walk through them. And readiness is built in private moments when nobody is watching, when nobody is applauding, when it would be easier to quit than to continue. Those are the moments where you either build your future or you abandon it. There is a discipline required to succeed that most people try to avoid. They want the reward without the resistance. They want the result without the routine. But discipline is not punishment, it is alignment. It aligns your actions with your goals. It closes the gap between where you are and where you say you want to be. When you force yourself to wake up early, you are not just waking up, you are declaring that your purpose is more important than your comfort. When you force yourself to keep going after failure, you are not just persisting, you are building resilience that cannot be shaken. When you force yourself to stay consistent, you are not just repeating actions, you are shaping your identity. And identity is everything. Because once you see yourself as a disciplined person, as a focused person, as someone who follows through, then success stops being something you chase and starts being something you attract. Doors begin to open, not because of luck, but because of who you have become. Understand this, every great achievement you admire was built on moments where someone forced themselves to continue. They didn't feel like it. They were tired. They were discouraged. They had doubts, but they moved anyway. And that movement, repeated over time, created a path where there was none before. The problem is not that people don't know what to do. Most people know exactly what they should be doing. The problem is that they negotiate with their own greatness. They make deals with their comfort. They say, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll start when I feel better, or I need more time. But time does not wait. Opportunity does not pause. Life does not adjust itself to your hesitation. If you want doors to open, you must first become someone who knocks. And not just once, but repeatedly, persistently, relentlessly. You must knock when it's inconvenient. You must knock when it's uncomfortable. You must knock when it feels like nothing is happening. Because every knock is not just an action, it is a signal that you are serious, a signal that you are committed, a signal that you are ready. And life responds to signals. When you force yourself to grow, to learn, to push beyond what is easy, you begin to shift something invisible. You begin to change your environment, your relationships, your opportunities. People start to notice. Circumstances start to adjust. And suddenly, what once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. But it all starts with you. Not your situation, not your background, not your past. It starts with your willingness to do what is required, regardless of how you feel about it. You have to reach a point where your commitment is stronger than your emotions, where your vision is louder than your excuses, where your desire to succeed outweighs your desire to stay comfortable. Because comfort has never created greatness. Comfort has never opened doors. Comfort has never changed lives. Force yourself, not because you are weak, but because you are powerful enough to command your own behavior. Force yourself, not because you are lacking, but because you are capable of more than you have shown. Force yourself, not out of fear, but out of purpose. And when you do that consistently, when you show up again and again with that level of determination, something remarkable begins to happen. The doors you once thought were locked begin to open. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin to come closer. Paths that once felt invisible begin to appear. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Discipline over feelings is where the real transformation of a human being begins. Because if you study your life carefully, you will discover that most of your failures were not caused by a lack of ability, but by a lack of control over your emotions. And this is where many people misunderstand the journey to success. They believe that successful people feel different. They imagine that those who achieve greatness wake up every day excited, motivated, and ready to conquer the world. But the truth is far more powerful than that. The truth is that successful people often feel the same resistance, the same laziness, the same doubt, but they have trained themselves not to obey those feelings. You must come to a point in your life where you realize that your feelings were never designed to lead you. Feelings are temporary. They shift constantly. One moment you feel inspired, the next moment you feel tired. One day you are confident, the next day you are full of doubt. If you build your life on something that's unstable, then your results will always be inconsistent. And inconsistency is the enemy of success. Discipline, on the other hand, is stable. It does not depend on mood. It does not ask for permission from your emotions. It simply says, this is what must be done, and then it gets it done. That is why forcing yourself is not a negative thing. It is a necessary thing. Because there will be days when your mind will try to convince you that rest is more important than progress, that comfort is more valuable than growth, that quitting is easier than continuing. And in those moments, if you do not have discipline, you will follow your feelings straight into mediocrity. But when you develop discipline, you create a higher authority within yourself. A voice that overrides excuses. A voice that says, I don't care how you feel, we are moving forward. This is not about ignoring your humanity. This is about mastering it. Because inside every human being, there is a conflict between what is easy and what is right. Feelings usually push you toward what is easy. Discipline pushes you toward what is right. And success always lives on the side of what is right, not what is easy. Consider how many dreams have been delayed simply because someone didn't feel like it. They didn't feel like waking up early. They didn't feel like working on their goals. They didn't feel like pushing through discomfort, and so day after day they postponed their future. Not because they couldn't achieve it, but because they allowed their feelings to dictate their actions. And when feelings become your leader, your potential becomes your prisoner. You must reverse that order. You must make your actions lead and allow your feelings to follow. Because feelings are followers by nature. When you take action, even when you don't feel like it, something begins to shift inside you. You may start tired, but as you continue, energy begins to rise. You may start unmotivated, but as you progress, clarity begins to form. This is because action creates a new emotional state. It is not the other way around. This is why waiting to feel ready is one of the most dangerous habits you can develop. Readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision. You become ready by acting, not by waiting. You become strong by doing difficult things, not by avoiding them. And every time you force yourself to act in spite of how you feel, you are building a version of yourself that is not easily shaken. Discipline is also what separates those who start from those who finish. Many people begin with excitement. They begin with energy. They begin with big dreams and strong intentions. But when the initial emotion fades, and it always does, they stop because they were relying on feelings to sustain them. But those who succeed understand something deeper. They understand that the middle of the journey is not emotional, it is mechanical. It is repetitive. It is often boring. And it is in that boring consistency that greatness is built. You must train yourself to show up even when it feels ordinary, to work even when it feels repetitive, to continue even when it feels slow. Because feelings crave excitement, but success requires endurance. And endurance is built through discipline. There is also a level of self-respect that comes with discipline. Because every time you do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, you are proving something to yourself. You are building trust within your own mind. You are sending a message that your word matters, that your goals matter, that your future matters, and that internal trust becomes a powerful force. It strengthens your confidence, not because of what you say, but because of what you repeatedly do. On the other hand, every time you give in to your feelings, every time you break your own commitment, you weaken that trust. You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to question your ability to follow through. And over time, that doubt becomes a barrier that holds you back, not because you are incapable, but because you have trained yourself to stop. So discipline is not just about productivity, it is about identity. It is about becoming someone who follows through regardless of emotional resistance. And once that identity is established, everything begins to change. Your habits improve, your focus sharpens, your results increase. Not because you suddenly became more talented, but because you became more consistent. And consistency is what compounds over time. Small disciplined actions repeated daily create massive results. But those results are invisible in the beginning. And this is where many people struggle, because feelings want immediate reward. They want to see progress right away. They want to feel like the effort is worth it. But discipline understands something that feelings do not. It understands time. Discipline is willing to invest effort today for a reward that may not come tomorrow. It is willing to continue even when there is no immediate feedback. It is willing to trust the process. And that trust is what allows you to keep going long enough to see results. You must also understand that feelings often lie. They tell you that you are too tired when you still have energy. They tell you that you are not capable when you have untapped potential. They tell you that it is not the right time, when in reality, the only right time is now. If you listen to those lies long enough, they become your truth. But discipline challenges those lies. It tests them. It proves them wrong through action. When you force yourself to act despite your feelings, you begin to discover a new level of strength. You realize that you are not as limited as you thought. You realize that you can push further, work harder, endure longer. And that realization expands your capacity. It raises your standard. It changes what you believe is possible for yourself. This is how greatness is built, not in moments of inspiration, but in moments of resistance. Not when it is easy, but when it is difficult. Not when you feel like it, but when you don't. There will be mornings when getting out of bed feels like a battle. There will be days when your mind is filled with doubt. There will be times when quitting seems like the most reasonable option. And in those moments, discipline becomes your anchor. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you moving. It keeps you aligned with your purpose. Because your purpose is bigger than your feelings. Your goals are more important than your temporary discomfort. And your future is too valuable to be controlled by something as unstable as emotion. So you must train yourself daily, not just physically or mentally, but emotionally. You must practice doing what is required regardless of how you feel. You must build the habit of action. You must develop the mindset that says feelings are temporary, but my commitment is permanent. Indeed. And when you reach that level of discipline, something powerful happens. Life begins to respond differently to you, because discipline creates results and results create opportunities. People begin to trust you. Doors begin to open. Paths begin to appear. Not because you wished for them, but because you prepared for them. It all begins with a simple but powerful shift from being controlled by your feelings to taking control of your actions. From waiting for motivation to creating momentum. From seeking comfort to pursuing growth. And that shift starts the moment you decide that your feelings will no longer be your master, but your servant. Action creates momentum, and momentum is the invisible force that carries a person from intention into reality. Most people underestimate the power of a single step because they are too focused on the entire journey. They look at the distance between where they are and where they want to be, and they become overwhelmed. That overwhelm turns into hesitation, and hesitation turns into inaction. But what they fail to understand is that success is never achieved in one giant leap. It is built through consistent movement. And that movement begins with action, not motivation. You must realize that motivation is one of the most misunderstood forces in human behavior. People treat motivation like a starting point, something they must feel before they can begin. They sit and wait for the perfect mood, the perfect energy, the perfect mindset. But motivation does not come before action. It comes because of action. It is a response, not a requirement. It is a byproduct, not a cause. And when you reverse that order in your life, everything begins to change. When you take action, even the smallest action, you send a signal to your mind that something is happening. That signal creates movement, and movement generates energy. It may not feel like much in the beginning. It may feel slow, insignificant, even pointless. But that is how momentum works. It starts quietly. It builds gradually. And if you keep moving, it reaches a point where it becomes unstoppable. Think about a heavy object that has been sitting still for a long time. The hardest part is not keeping it moving, it is getting it started. That initial push requires the most effort. But once it begins to move, something shifts. The resistance decreases. The movement becomes smoother. And eventually, what once felt heavy begins to feel manageable. Your life works the same way. When you are stuck, everything feels difficult. But once you begin to act, even in small ways, you begin to break that resistance. This is why waiting is so dangerous. Waiting keeps you in a state of stillness, and stillness strengthens resistance. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start. The more you think about what you should do, the heavier it feels. And over time, that weight turns into fear, doubt, and procrastination. But action cuts through all of that. It interrupts the cycle. It replaces overthinking with movement. You don't need to have everything figured out to begin. You don't need to know every step of the journey. You don't need to feel confident already. All you need is the willingness to take the next step, because clarity does not come before action. It comes during action. As you move, you learn. As you try, you adjust. As you progress, you understand. But none of that happens if you remain still. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when you take action. You begin to see yourself differently. Instead of being someone who thinks, plans, and hesitates, you become someone who does. And that identity shift is powerful, because once you see yourself as a person of action, your behavior begins to align with that identity. You stop negotiating with yourself as much. You stop delaying as often. You begin to trust your ability to move forward even when things are uncertain. Momentum also creates confidence. Not the kind of confidence that comes from positive thinking, but the kind that comes from proof. Every time you take action and follow through, you are building evidence that you can handle challenges, that you can make progress, that you can overcome resistance. And that evidence strengthens your belief in yourself. It replaces doubt with certainty. It replaces fear with courage. But here is where many people make a critical mistake. They underestimate the importance of consistency. They take action once, maybe twice, and then they stop. They expect immediate results. They expect a dramatic change. And when that doesn't happen, they lose interest. But momentum does not reward inconsistency. It requires repetition. It requires commitment. It requires you to keep moving even when the results are not yet visible. You must understand that momentum compounds over time. Each action builds on the previous one. Each step adds to your progress. And while the individual steps may seem small, their combined effect is powerful. It is like water dripping on a surface. One drop may not make a difference, but over time, those drops create impact. In the same way, your daily actions shape your future. There will be days when the action feels easy, when everything flows, when your energy is high, when your progress feels natural. But there will also be days when it feels difficult, when you are tired, distracted, or discouraged. And those are the days that matter the most. Because momentum is not built in comfort, it is built in resistance. It is built when you choose to act even when it would be easier not to. You must train yourself to value movement over perfection, because perfection is often the enemy of action. It convinces you that things must be just right before you begin. It tells you that you need more time, more preparation, more certainty. But perfection is an illusion. It keeps you stuck in planning while progress waits on the other side of action. Action does not need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be intentional. It needs to be repeated. And when you focus on taking action regularly, you begin to refine your approach naturally. You improve through experience. You grow through effort. You become better because you are doing, not because you are waiting. Another powerful aspect of action is that it changes your environment. When you move, things begin to respond. Opportunities begin to appear. People begin to notice. Circumstances begin to shift. Not because of luck, but because action creates visibility. It puts you in motion, and motion creates interaction. And through that interaction, new doors begin to open. But those doors do not open for those who are standing still. They open for those who are moving, trying, failing, learning, and trying again. Because action demonstrates commitment. It shows that you are serious about your goals. It shows that you are willing to invest effort, and that willingness attracts opportunities. You must also be prepared for the fact that not all action will lead to immediate success. Some actions will lead to failure. Some will lead to mistakes. Some will not produce the results you hoped for. But even those outcomes are valuable because they teach you, they guide you, they help you adjust your path, and in the process, they keep your momentum alive. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is part of it. And action is what allows you to move through failure instead of being stopped by it. When you take action, you are not just working towards success, you are building resilience. You are strengthening your ability to continue despite setbacks. And that resilience is what keeps your momentum going in the long term. There is a rhythm to momentum. It starts slow, it builds gradually, and then it accelerates. But that acceleration only happens if you remain consistent long enough. If you stop too soon, you never experience the full power of momentum. You remain in the early stages where effort feels heavy and results feel distant. But if you keep going, you reach a point where your progress begins to multiply. At that point, things that once felt difficult become easier. Habits become automatic. Actions become natural, and your growth becomes visible. But all of that is on the other side of consistent action. So you must make a decision to stop waiting and start moving. To stop relying on motivation and start creating it. To stop overthinking and start doing. Because action is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And without that bridge, your goals remain nothing more than ideas. Every moment you choose action, you are building momentum. Every step you take, no matter how small, is moving you forward. And as that movement continues, it creates a force that becomes stronger than your doubts, stronger than your fears, stronger than your excuses. And once that force is strong enough, it carries you, it pushes you, it drives you forward even on the days when you struggle. That is the power of momentum. It begins with effort, but it eventually becomes a force of its own. So do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not wait for the perfect feeling. Do not wait for everything to align. Begin where you are. Use what you have. Take the step that is in front of you. Because the moment you act, you shift something. The moment you move, you create energy. And the moment you commit to consistent action, you set momentum into motion. And once momentum is in motion, it will take you further than motivation ever could. Identity shapes opportunity in ways most people never fully realize, because they spend their lives trying to change their results without ever addressing the person producing those results. They chase success as if it is something outside of them, something they must find, something they must reach. But success is not something you pursue. It is something you align with. And alignment begins with identity. You must understand that who you believe you are determines what you allow yourself to do. It determines how you think, how you act, how you respond to challenges, and ultimately what you attract into your life. Your identity is not just a label. It is a system. It is a framework that governs your behavior, often without you even being aware of it. And if that identity is limited, then your results will always reflect that limitation. Many people say they want success, but their identity is still rooted in doubt, inconsistency, and fear. They want discipline, but they see themselves as someone who procrastinates. They want confidence, but they see themselves as someone who hesitates. They want growth, but they identify with comfort. And this internal contradiction creates resistance. Because no matter how strong your desire is, your identity will always pull you back to what feels familiar. This is why forcing yourself to grow is so important. Because growth is not just about changing what you do, it is about changing who you are. Every time you force yourself to act beyond your comfort zone, you are challenging your current identity. You are breaking the pattern. You are sending a message to your mind that says, I am not who I used to be. Intending to At first, this will feel unnatural. It will feel uncomfortable because your mind is designed to protect your current identity, even if that identity is limiting you. It prefers familiarity over progress. It prefers safety over expansion. So, when you begin to act differently, when you begin to push yourself, your mind will resist. It will try to pull you back into old habits. It will remind you of who you used to be. But this is where persistence becomes critical, because identity is not changed in a single moment. It is reshaped through repeated action. Every time you choose discipline over procrastination, you are casting a vote for a new identity. Every time you follow through on your commitments, you are reinforcing a new self-image. And over time, those repeated actions begin to redefine who you are. You must become intentional about the identity you are building. You cannot leave it to chance. You cannot allow your past to define your future. You must decide clearly and consciously who you are becoming, not based on your current circumstances, but based on your desired destination. If you want to be successful, you must begin to see yourself as someone who succeeds. Not in a superficial way, not just through positive affirmations, but through consistent behavior. Because identity is not built by what you say, it is built by what you repeatedly do. When you act like a disciplined person, you become disciplined. When you act like a focused person, you become focused. When you act like someone who finishes what they start, you become that person. And as that identity strengthens, your behavior begins to align with it naturally. This is when opportunity begins to change. Because opportunities are not random. They are often a response to who you are. People trust those who are consistent. They invest in those who are reliable. They collaborate with those who show discipline and focus. And when your identity reflects those qualities, you begin to attract different kinds of opportunities. Think about it. If you see yourself as someone who gives up easily, you will avoid challenges. You will hesitate to take risks. You will miss opportunities because you do not believe you can handle them. But if you see yourself as someone who persists, who adapts, who overcomes, then you will approach those same opportunities with confidence. You will take action. You will engage. And that engagement is what creates results. Your identity also influences how you interpret failure. If your identity is fragile, failure will feel like proof that you are not capable. It will discourage you. It will cause you to stop. But if your identity is strong, failure becomes feedback. It becomes information. It becomes a tool for growth. And that difference in interpretation determines whether you continue or quit. You must build an identity that is resilient, an identity that is not easily shaken by setbacks, an identity that understands that challenges are part of the process, not a sign to stop. And that kind of identity is built through experience, through action, through effort, through persistence. Forcing yourself to grow accelerates this process because it pushes you into situations that demand a higher version of yourself. It requires you to think differently, act differently, respond differently. And as you meet those demands, you begin to expand your capacity. You begin to see yourself in a new light. This is where confidence truly comes from. Not from thinking positively, but from proving to yourself that you can handle difficulty, that you can adapt, that you can continue even when things are uncertain. And that proof changes your identity at a deep level. Once your identity shifts, your standards begin to rise. You no longer tolerate the same level of mediocrity. You no longer accept the same excuses. You begin to expect more from yourself, and those expectations influence your actions. They push you to perform at a higher level consistently. And as your performance improves, your results improve. And as your results improve, your opportunities expand. It becomes a cycle. Identity shapes action, action shapes results, results reinforce identity. And that cycle continues to elevate you. But it all begins with a decision to stop identifying with your limitations and start identifying with your potential. You must let go of the labels that have held you back. The labels that say you are not disciplined, not focused, not capable. Those labels are not permanent. They are the result of past behavior, not a definition of your future. And you have the power to change them. Every day is an opportunity to redefine yourself. Every action is a chance to reinforce a new identity. And every moment you choose growth over comfort, you are stepping closer to becoming the person you need to be. It will not happen overnight. It will require effort. It will require consistency. It will require you to push through discomfort and uncertainty. But the reward is transformation. not just in what you achieve, but in who you become. And when you become the right person, success is no longer something you chase. It is something that aligns with you. Opportunities begin to recognize you. Doors begin to open for you, not because of luck, but because of identity. You become someone who is prepared, someone who is capable, someone who is ready. And readiness is what opportunity responds to. So do not focus only on what you want to achieve. Focus on who you need to become, because the person you become will determine the life you create. Force yourself to grow, not just for the results, but for the transformation. Because in that transformation, you will find a version of yourself that is stronger, more disciplined, more focused, and more capable than you ever imagined. And that version of you will not wait for opportunity, it will attract it. Persistence unlocks doors in a way that nothing else can, because life does not reward those who try once, it responds to those who refuse to stop. There is a level of power in relentless effort that most people never experience, not because it is unavailable, but because they give up too soon. They knock on the door once, maybe twice, and when it does not open immediately, they walk away. But success does not work like that. Opportunity does not respond to hesitation. It responds to consistency, to pressure, to someone who keeps showing up long after others have stopped. You must understand that every door you desire has resistance built into it. That resistance is not there to block you. It is there to test you. It is there to determine whether you are serious or just interested. Because there is a difference between interest and commitment. When you are interested, you act when it is convenient. You act when it feels good. You act when the conditions are right. But when you are committed, you act regardless of how you feel. You act regardless of the obstacles. You act regardless of the results. And it is commitment expressed through persistence that unlocks doors. Most people underestimate how close they are to a breakthrough. They quit in the middle of the process, not realizing that the very resistance they are experiencing is often a sign that they are getting closer. They interpret difficulty as a signal to stop, when in reality it is often a signal to continue. Because the closer you get to something meaningful, the more resistance you will encounter. Not because it is impossible, but because it requires a higher version of you. Persistence is what carries you through that resistance. It is what allows you to continue when progress is slow, when results are invisible, when doubt begins to creep in. It is the ability to say, I will keep going even when every part of you wants to quit. And that ability is rare, not because it is difficult to develop, but because it requires a level of discipline and self-belief that most people are not willing to cultivate. It requires you to trust the process even when you cannot see the outcome. It requires you to invest effort without immediate reward. It requires you to continue knocking on doors that have not yet opened. But here is what you must realize. Every time you knock, something is happening, even if you cannot see it. Every effort you make is building something. It is building experience, resilience, skill, awareness. It is shaping you into someone who is capable of handling the opportunity when it finally appears. Because the truth is, many people are not ready for the doors they are asking to be opened. They want success, but they have not developed the capacity to sustain it. They want opportunity, but they have not built the discipline to manage it. And so, when the door remains closed, they become frustrated, not realizing that the delay is part of their preparation. Persistence ensures that you stay in the process long enough to become ready. It ensures that you continue growing, continue learning, continue improving. And as you do, something begins to shift, not just within you, but around you. Life begins to respond differently to persistent people, because persistence sends a clear message. It says, I am not going away. It says, I am serious about this. It says, I am willing to do what it takes. And that message is powerful. It creates trust. It creates credibility. It creates opportunities. People begin to notice your consistency. They begin to recognize your effort. They begin to see your commitment. And that recognition often leads to opportunities that would not have existed otherwise. Doors begin to open, not because you demanded them, but because you proved that you were ready. Persistence also changes your relationship with failure. Instead of seeing it as an end point, you begin to see it as part of the journey. You understand that each failure is not a reason to stop, but a reason to adjust. It becomes feedback, not defeat. And that shift in perspective allows you to continue moving forward without being discouraged. Because if you are persistent, failure cannot stop you. It can only redirect you. There is a rhythm to persistence. It is not about working endlessly without rest. It is about refusing to quit. It is about maintaining your commitment over time. It is about showing up again and again, even if your pace is slow, even if your progress is not perfect. You must develop the mindset that says, as long as I am moving, I am winning. Because progress is not always visible. Sometimes it is internal. Sometimes it is happening beneath the surface. Sometimes it is preparing you for something greater. And if you stop too soon, you interrupt that process. Many people want guarantees before they continue. They want certainty. They want proof that their efforts will pay off. But persistence does not require guarantees. It creates them. It turns uncertainty into opportunity through consistent effort. You must be willing to walk a path where the outcome is not always clear. You must be willing to continue even when you cannot see the finish line. Because the finish line reveals itself to those who keep moving, not to those who stand still. Persistence also builds strength, not just physical or mental strength, but emotional strength. It teaches you how to handle disappointment, how to manage frustration, how to overcome doubt. It develops a level of resilience that cannot be shaken easily. And that resilience becomes one of your greatest assets. Because on the journey to success, there will be moments when things do not go as planned. There will be setbacks. There will be delays. There will be challenges that test your patience and your belief. And in those moments, persistence is what keeps you grounded. It is what keeps you focused. It is what keeps you moving. You must also understand that persistence is a choice you make daily. It is not something you decide once and forget. It is something you recommit to over and over again. Every day you wake up, you have a choice to continue or to quit. And every time you choose to continue, you strengthen your persistence. Over time, that persistence becomes part of your identity. You become someone who does not give up easily. You become someone who finishes what they start. You become someone who pushes through challenges instead of avoiding them. And that identity attracts opportunities, because opportunities are drawn to those who are reliable, who are consistent, who are committed. They are drawn to those who have proven that they can handle difficulty. And persistence is the proof. It is also important to recognize that not every door will open, and that is part of the process. Persistence is not about forcing every situation to work. It is about continuing until the right one does. It is about learning from each experience, adjusting your approach, and moving forward with greater awareness. Sometimes a closed door is not a rejection, it is redirection. It is guiding you towards something better, something more aligned with your purpose. And if you are persistent, you will continue searching, continue knocking, continue moving until you find it. You must develop a long-term perspective, because success is not built in a day, a week, or even a month. It is built over time through consistent effort, through repeated action, through unwavering commitment. And persistence is what sustains that effort over time. There will be moments when you feel like nothing is happening, when it seems like your efforts are not producing results, when it feels like you are stuck. But those moments are part of the process. They are the testing ground for your persistence. They are the moments where you decide whether you will continue or stop. And if you choose to continue, if you choose to persist, you will eventually reach a point where things begin to change, where your efforts begin to compound, where your progress becomes visible, where doors begin to open. Not all at once, not suddenly, but gradually. One opportunity leads to another. One breakthrough leads to the next. And over time, the doors that once seemed impossible to open begin to swing wide. But none of that happens without persistence. So you must commit to the process. You must decide that quitting is no longer an option. You must train yourself to continue, regardless of how you feel, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of how difficult it becomes. Because persistence is not just about achieving your goals. It is about becoming the kind of person who can achieve them. It is about developing the strength, the discipline, the resilience required for success. And once you have that, once you have built that level of persistence within yourself, there is very little that can stop you. Doors will open, not because they were easy to open, but because you refuse to walk away.